So we can start?
Yeah.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Chai. I am a lawyer upstairs on the second floor of the same building that Home Life Landmark is in. I'm at Suite 215, and Sammy has asked me to come in and speak to you guys today about some legal issues that you may encounter in the purchase and sale of rural recreational properties, mostly cottages. So I guess we're just about to begin, and let's just start. Oh, by the way, this is my contact information in case any of you want to talk to me afterwards. If you have any questions about this seminar, or if you have any other questions about. Oh, okay. So if you have any other questions about any of the deals that you're doing, or any questions about anything about real estate, you can just give me a call or email me. My phone number is listed here, and so is my email. So we're just about to go ahead and begin. I guess we should just proceed then. Okay, so I just want to make a point that the legal issues that a buyer and an agent will encounter in the purchase of rural recreational properties are very different than what you would encounter in the purchase of urban residential properties. You have to do a lot more due diligence when you're buying rural recreational properties, because they're not like the standard urban properties that you find in, say, in Markham or Richmond Hill, which is pretty standard. In the purchase of rural recreational properties, I'll just refer to them as cottages. You're going to encounter many different issues. It's a lot more complicated transaction than just say buying a standard house in Markham or in Richmond Hill. Okay, you have to be careful to identify and focus on these issues so that the buyer will not be dealing with them before and or after closing. For a lot of these issues, you have to make the necessary inquiries with the seller, the local municipality, and or any other party, and advise your buyer client accordingly. So like I said before, there's a lot of due diligence that you have to do before you and your client are interested and make an offer on a cottage. Because like I said, there's a lot of different issues, a lot more complex issues than if you're just buying a house in, say, Richmond Hill or Markham. Okay, because most of the houses you find in Richmond Hill and Markham, they're very standardized. They're on a plan of subdivision. There's usually a public road that leads to access to the house, and a lot of houses are serviced by municipal water and by municipal sewer, and they're usually built in a standard way. So you don't really have that many issues when you're buying a house in Markham or in Richmond Hill. But if you're buying a cottage, say, up in Peterborough or up in Muskoka, there's a lot of issues that you're going to have to face, and you're going to have to deal with. And some of the issues I'm going to talk about right now. All right. So once again, the due diligence in a cottage that you have to do is a lot more than the due diligence that you would do in a house, say, in an urban area like Markham or Richmond Hill. So we're going to be discussing the following legal issues in the purchase and sale of recreational or cottages. We're going to be dealing with legal access, zoning designation, any building permits, occupancy permits, or work orders, the source of the water for the property. Most of the time will be a water well. The sanitation for the property, most of the time will be a septic tank system. Personal properties to be included in the offer, for example, boats. Shoreline road allowances, which is something that you won't really encounter in an urban property, but that's something that you should be aware of as well. Conservation authority jurisdiction. Okay, and there are some other issues we'll talk about as well. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the legal access to the property. In areas like Markham or Richmond Hill, usually legal access is by way of a public road, okay, to the property. But with cottages, it's a lot different. You have to determine for yourself, you have to satisfy for yourself, how does your client get to the property that he or she may be purchasing? There has to be some sort of a legal access to the property. Okay. Now, sometimes you may find that the road itself is public, right? So if that's the case, it's a municipally maintained road, it's a public road. A lot of the times the municipality will not maintain the road all year round. So you have to satisfy yourself with the municipality whether that road will be maintained all year round or whether it's just maintained, say, in the summer months. Because a lot of municipalities will not maintain the road because it's just too expensive to maintain it during the winter months. So even if the road itself that's leading to your cottage is a municipal road, you still have to satisfy yourself that the road itself will be maintained by the municipality all year round. Sometimes the road may not be maintained all year round, and it's up to the cottages in the area, all the owners of the cottages in the area to maybe contribute to some sort of a maintenance program that will maintain that road during the winter months. So that's something you have to satisfy yourself. And by the way, if you guys have any questions, feel free to interrupt me and and to ask. Okay, if you have any questions, you're not sure about something I'm talking about, just feel free to put it into the chat. Is that right? The chat. Okay. So now we're talking. Sometimes access to the property may be private. It may be by way of a private right-of-way, a private easement. It may be a private road. Okay, it may not be maintained, or it may not be owned by the municipality. If that's the case, you have to make sure, if it's a private road, that you have to make sure who maintains it, whether it's all the cottagers in the area. They may contribute to some sort of an association that would maintain that private road. And you also have to make sure that there's some legal basis for that easement or right of way or the private road. You have to make sure that that there's something registered on title to say that the person the buyer that's buying the cottage has a legal basis for going into that cottage, whether it's by way of a easement or a right of way. And you also have to make sure that not only to register on title, but you have to make sure that the road is not obstructed as well. So you have to make sure that the road doesn't have any sort of debris on it, any sort of like a rock outcrop. Okay, so you have to make sure that the road itself is safe to travel on. Okay, so you a lot of times you can consult with your lawyer. The lawyer, the lawyer that's going to be acting on the purchase, you can consult with him or her, and you can say to him, can you check on title to make sure that some sort of an easement or right of way registered on title that allows my client, the buyer, to use that particular road to go to his or her cottage, the one that he or she is interested in buying. Now, sometimes access to the property, it's only by way of water. So you have to travel to the property only by boat. Okay, those cottages are very expensive and very, very secluded, very exclusive. But you have to also make sure that there's access to that property by way of water, and you have to make sure that there's a public dock, okay, that your boat could be launched to go to that particular cottage. All right. So far, do we have any questions about legal access to the property? Now, a lot of this is it's something you can actually ask the lawyer to look into. For example, the private road, you can ask the lawyer to do a title search to make sure that that there's some sort of an easement or right of way registered that allows your client to use that private road. But sometimes you can also make these inquiries yourself. You can go to the local municipality and just ask who owns that road, like the one that's being used to travel to the cottage that your client is interested in buying. Okay, we have a question here. Can the deed for accessing to beach be transferred? I think you're talking about another issue that we're going to be coming across. Maybe you're talking about the shoreline road allowance. Well, we'll be talking about that in a little bit. But right now, I'm just talking about the access to the property itself. Okay, is that the only question we have so far? So do you understand? Does everybody understand? Once again, like access to the property to a cottage is a lot different than access to a house, say in Richmond Hill and Markham. Now in Richmond Hill and Markham, if you're buying any, like most houses, they will have a public road, and you can be pretty sure that it's going to be maintained all year round, and also that it's owned by the municipality so that there's public access to it. But with cottages, it's a lot different. Cottages tend to be a lot more secluded. They tend to be a little bit more unorganized than urban properties. So a lot of times access to the cottage may not be obvious. You may not know just looking at it, like what is the legal access, what sort of access, whether the access is legal or not. Okay. And also, like I said before, access to the cottage can be by way of water only. You can only get to the cottage by traveling on a boat through a lake or a river. Okay, those cottages are very exclusive, and most of the time I find them to be very expensive, but that may be the only way to access the property as well. So you have to tell your client, that obviously, you need to have a boat, and the only way you can get to the property is by way of water only, by way of a boat. Okay. Do you have any other questions, or are we all clear on dealing with legal access? Okay, so let's move on to the next item. It's the zoning designation for the property. You have to check with the municipality to see whether the property is zoned for all year round use, or whether it's only zoned for seasonal use, say only during the summertime. Okay, a lot of times the property that the cottage that your client is buying may only be zoned for seasonal use, because the municipality doesn't want to come in and doesn't want to have the responsibility of looking after the roads. And a lot of time they don't want people to be living there all year round. They want it to be purely seasonal property. Okay, because they may not, the municipality may not have the infrastructure to accommodate all year round use. Okay, they want you to only be there seasonally. So this is something else you need to look into. You need to check with the municipality to make sure that the property can be occupied all year round.
Roger Lee, please come to the front desk.
Or if the property can only be used seasonally. Sometimes some municipality may have it that it may have a bylaw in place saying that the property can only be used, say, 270 days out of 365 days. Okay, only for 9 months. Okay, and then if that's the case, you have to advise your client accordingly. You have to tell them, look, you can only come here certain times. Okay, you can only, this can't be used by you all year round. Okay, obviously that's very important for your client to know. Okay, so do you have any questions about the zoning designation? Now, in urban areas like in Markham or in Richmond Hill or in Vaughan or in the city of Toronto, there won't be any sort of seasonal designation. Most properties can be used all year round. But with cottages, it's a little bit different. Sometimes you'll find that the cottage can only be used seasonally. Okay, so this is something you must check out. You must look into when your client is interested in a property. Okay, so far are we all good? Are we all good with this the second issue, the zoning designation? Now, next thing we're going to talk about is building permits, occupancy permits, and work orders. A lot of times you'll find that cottages are custom built. They're built specifically to cater to the person who's buying the cottage. Now, with custom built homes, you have to make sure that all the building permits have been obtained to build the cottage, and that they've been inspected, and that the building permits are closed, and that the cottage is ready for occupancy, that the cottage can be occupied, and that there are no work orders issued by the municipality with respect to the construction. This is also very important too, because I find that a lot of times with custom built homes, a lot of times the builder will not open a permit, or will open a permit, but will not see that the permit gets closed off, and will not make sure that there's occupancy, there's an occupancy permit so that the property can be legally occupied. And sometimes you'll find a work order is issued as well. Like I said, you can go to the local municipality and you can check with the local municipality. And I find most of the time, a lot of these local municipalities in the rural areas, they're very good at accommodating you. They will actually check and tell you whether there's any outstanding building permits or work orders on the property, and whether the property can be legally occupied. Okay, so this is something you should look into as well. Obviously, you do not want your client to buy a property that has open building permits or has work orders, or is not legally able to be occupied. There's no occupancy permit. Obviously, you don't want your client to buy that, because once they buy the property, that becomes their problems, and then they'll have to look into it and solve it as well. And a lot of times, to close a building permit or to close a work order, it could cost your client a lot of money. Like, it'd be very expensive to get these work orders closed or to get the building permits closed. So this is something you should look into beforehand. Okay, I find that in a lot of the urban areas, the builders building a lot of homes in a subdivision, they will generally be very good at closing out the building permits and making sure that there's an occupancy permit for the property. But I find that in a lot of these rural areas, in a lot of cottage situations, I find that there are issues with building permits. A lot of times the builder will open up a building permit for the construction, but will not close off the building permit. And sometimes there'll be work orders outstanding against the cottage as well. Okay, let me just get a drink of water here. We'll just go on. Okay, so far, do we have any questions about the first three topics, the first three issues we talk about: legal access, building permits, and zoning designations? Okay, we have a question here. How can we know if it's a pending work order? Like I said, you can go to the local municipality, to the local town, the town office, okay, the municipal office, and just talk to them and see whether there's any work orders pending or outstanding against the property. Okay, most of the time they will accommodate you. I find them a lot of times they will just check their records and tell you, especially if you tell them that you're a real estate agent and that your client is interested in buying a property. Okay. Okay. Do you have any other questions, or do we should we keep on going? Okay. The next issue we're going to talk about is the source of the water for the property. A lot of times you'll find that with cottages, they are not serviced by a municipal water system. A lot of times the source of the water for the cottage will be a water well. Okay, it's just too expensive because a lot of these cottages are very remote and there's space very far apart. It's just too expensive for the municipality to have some sort of a municipal water system for the cottage. Unlike in houses in Markham and Richmond Hill, you'll find that most of the time they're connected up by a municipal water system. In cottages, it's kind of the opposite because these cottages are very remote. It's not practical. It's not practical for the municipality to install some sort of a municipal water system to service that property. So a lot of times you'll find that the source of the property will be a water well. Okay. Now you have to make sure that if it is a water well, you have to make sure that there's acceptable quality so that the water can be it's potable, meaning that it can't, or potable, it can be drunk, okay, or it can be drinked. All right, because you have to make sure that the water is is clean enough, okay, that it's actually able to be drunk by the owner. All right, and the way you check to make sure that the quality of the water is acceptable is you get a local health unit analysis. So you can go to the local Ministry of Health, and you can maybe check with their records to see whether or not they've done any testing of the water to make sure that the water is good. Okay, and if they haven't done that, then you can actually hire some private labs to go and inspect the water and to do a test and to make sure that the test shows that the water doesn't have any bacteria, that it's clean, okay, and that it's able to be it's potable, okay, meaning it could be drunk, okay, it's clean enough to be drinked by the owner. All right. You also have to make sure that the water pressure is sufficient, so that, you know, like when you say your client is it's going to be taking a shower, that, you know, like that there's enough water pressure so that, you know, they're able to take a shower, that they're able to you know, like use the water for washing dishes because there's enough water pressure. And to do that, you need to get what's called a well driller certificate. Okay, a well driller will come in and will make sure that the pressure throughout the house, the water pressure throughout the house is adequate, so that you're able to do basic things like take a shower or to wash, okay, to wash and to wash your, you know, to wash your dishes and stuff, because you don't want your client to be buying a house and then find out there's not enough water pressure. So, you know, like stuff like taking a shower or washing dishes become almost next to impossible. So once again, if your client is buying a cottage and it has a well, you need to check for two things. You need to check for acceptable quality by way of some sort of a certificate from the local health unit or from a private lab to say that the water is good. And you need to have acceptable water pressure as well. And by doing that, you need to hire a well driller to make sure that the water pressure is sufficient. And a lot of times you'll find that with most financial institutions, most lenders, they will not lend money until they have acceptable certificates for both the water quality and the water quantity, the water flow. Okay, so do we have any questions about the source of water? Or are we able to keep on going? Okay, along the same lines of with water, we had to make sure that there's proper sanitation for the property. And once again, it's not practical for the municipality to build a municipal sewage system for your cottage, because like I said before, your cottage is in a remote area, okay, and it's just not feasible for the municipality to build a sewage system, okay, a municipal sewage system to service that cottage. So a lot of times you'll find for most cottages, you'll find that they have a septic tank system, okay, and you need to check with the owner to find out where the septic tank is located, because there's often a tank and a bed for the septic system. Okay, you need to find out where the tank is located and where the field bed is located. A lot of times the owner will tell you, you know, the bed and the tank itself, the septic tank, is located in a particular area, okay, and you have to find out where it is. And you also have to have an inspection of the tank itself. You need to make sure that the tank is okay, that there's no cracks, that it's not leaking. So you need to hire, I guess, an expert to come in and to do an inspection of the septic tank system to make sure that it's okay, that there was a permit issued for that to install that particular septic tank, and that the septic tank it's still okay, meaning that it doesn't have any cracks in it, that it's still functional. And sometimes you may have to go to the Ministry of the Environment to obtain a certificate of approval that allows the septic tank to still be used, or allows the septic tank to be there, and that it allows the septic tank to be used. So there's a lot of permit issues that you need to look into when you're dealing with a septic tank system. Okay, do you have any questions about septic tanks? Like I said, a lot of times you could ask the owner. The owner may actually have had the water tested. Okay, you can ask for the latest results. Maybe the owner may already have some sort of a result to give to you to show that the water is can be drunk. Okay, and at the same time, the owner may also have some documents with respect to the septic tank. Okay, they may have already had it inspected, and they may have the original permit as well for the septic tank, and they may have the certificate of approval from the Ministry of the Environment as well. So this is something that when you're making an offer, you can ask the owner, just ask them, you know, like, do you have any certificates or any documents for the water and for the septic tank? And the owner, I guess the vendor may be able to provide that to you. Okay, so far we do have any questions about the sanitation or the source of the water for the property? Do we have any questions? Now, you can see right now, there's a lot more issues that we need to deal with when we're dealing with a cottage. We already had to deal with the access. We had to deal with the zoning. We had to deal with any outstanding building permits or any outstanding work orders, whether the property can be legally occupied. We had to deal with the water well and the septic tank system. So far, this is just some of the issues you won't encounter when you're dealing with an urban property. Okay. And there's still a lot more that we have to talk about. Now, the next thing we need to deal with, you need to talk about when you're dealing with cottages, is you need to look into what sort of personal properties are to be included in the offer. For example, boats. You need to look into this because if there is going to be a boat included in the purchase, you need to make sure that it's specified in the offer. And you also need to know that if you're dealing with the purchase or sale of any personal properties in the agreement, that they may be subject to HST. So let's say, for example, your client is buying the boat for the cottage, for example, okay? And let's say you price the boat at, say, $30,000. HST is actually payable on the purchase of that boat. So you're going to have to pay 13% on the $30,000 that you've allocated to the boat itself. So just be aware that HST is payable on any personal properties that's included in the offer. Okay, so far so good. Do we have any questions? I'm just interested, how many of you have actually been involved in the purchase and sale of a cottage? Maybe you can just let me know in the chat. I'm just curious as to whether it's something that that a lot of the agents have encountered. Okay, Amy. You can still use the standard agreement of purchase and sale for a house, but you're going to have to put a lot more clauses and warranties. So there's going to be a lot more issues, but some of the issues I'm talking about, you should look into before your client makes the offer to satisfy yourself. For example, the zoning designation, you should talk to the municipality to satisfy yourself whether the zoning can be, the zoning designation is for all year-round use or whether it's for seasonal use. And the same thing with the building permits as well. You can talk to the local municipality. Now, I found that in a few cases, there actually wasn't a building permit issued for the cottage itself, or there wasn't a building permit issued for some of the additions that the owner had made to the cottage. I found throughout the course of my career, I found that in a couple of cottages, there wasn't actually a building permit issued, or there wasn't a building permit issued for the addition. So that caused a lot of problems, obviously, because I mean, you know, all the structures have, you know, anything that you're building has to have a building permit. Okay, so okay, Amy and Leo have both acted on the purchase and sale of a cottage. Did you find out a lot of the issues we're talking about came up at all, Amy, Leo? Like, was it something that you looked into before your clients went ahead and made the purchase? Okay, Leo. Okay, did you find that the with the cottage purchase that it was a lot more complicated than buying an urban property? Oh, for sure. Okay, yeah, for sure. Yes. Okay. Okay, so like I said, okay, if you're going to be buying a cottage, okay, I strongly recommend that you speak to a lawyer beforehand, even before you make the offer. You speak to your lawyer beforehand and you do some of this due diligence, because once you have a offer and it's a binding offer, it's very difficult to deal with issues after you have a binding offer, because a lot of times you made a deposit, okay, your client is really looking forward to moving in, and you know, like then all of a sudden you come across some of these legal issues, and a lot of times, for example, if it's a building permit issue, it can't be solved for closing. Okay, and then the client gets very disappointed because the client usually wants to be able to use the cottage for the summer, and then you come across a lot of these issues, and then the client all of a sudden, you know, becomes very frustrated because some of these legal issues, it's going to hold up closing or may even prevent the closing to take place. Okay, so it's better that you look into these issues before you make the offer, you know, and then find out what the issues are. Okay, for example, you may find out that the zoning may not be for all year round use, and then talk to your client and let the client know, you know, you can't use this cottage all year round. Okay, there's a prohibition against all year round use. You can only use it seasonally, and then let the client decide, oh, okay, I understand this issue and I still wish to proceed. Okay, then that's fine. And sometimes the client may not want to proceed. That's fine as well. At least you have not gone through the hassle of making an offer, putting a deposit in, you know, getting a closing date. The client is doing, you know, the financing, and all of a sudden you find out there's a deal breaker. There's an issue that's a deal breaker. So if you find out about these issues before you make the offer, then the client, you know, like you don't go through all that procedure. You know, you can tell the client beforehand, and the client may say, well, look, let's not make an offer on this property. I want to be able to use this property for all year round, but I can't. So I want to go and look for another property. Then everybody's happy. You know, your client isn't, you know, your client, you know, you've done a good service for your client by, you know, letting them know about this issue beforehand. And, you know, like, you know, and you don't go through the stress of making an offer, making a deposit, going through the financing and stuff, and then finding out that there's an issue that came up that's kind of almost a deal breaker for your client. Okay, I've been talking a lot, so just got to get some water here. Okay, so far, so are we good to go? Is any other questions or anything else that that people may be interested in asking, or can we move on? Okay, I guess we can move on. Now, the next thing that we're going to be talking about is what's called shoreline road allowances. Okay, actually, this is probably best illustrated by referring to the survey. So I'm going to go to the survey now. Okay, this is a fictitious survey that that I have, but it kind of illustrates all the issues that you may encounter when you're dealing with a cottage. Okay, and then how do we highlight? Yeah. Okay, this is a survey of a fictitious cottage. It's not a true survey, but it's only presented here just to show you some of the issues that we talked about. All right. Now, I guess while we're at the survey, we may be able to use the survey to talk about the other points that we actually already talked about. Now, here itself, this is the road that's leading to the cottage. Okay, the cottage boundary lines are here. Can you see the yellow? Can you see the yellow? Because I mean, I'm highlighting it. Can...
Yeah, maybe use a pointer will be good.
Okay.
Later switch.
Okay, thanks. Now, this is the it's not a typical cottage. Okay, we're not going to get that many problems with the cottage, but there's a lot of problems that's shown on the survey, you know, only for illustration purposes. Okay, so it is a fictitious survey, but it's I've included here just so that you can see some of the points that I'm talking about. All right. So you'll see here, this is the road that's leading to the cottage. The cottage itself is, they can see the line when I'm pointing. Right, this is the cottage itself. This boop, 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 right here. That's the cottage itself. Okay, and well, the first issue we talked about was legal access. Now, this is the access to the property by this road called Black Lake Road. Okay, and then this is here. Now you can see on the survey itself, it says it's not dedicated on plan, no transfer to municipality. What that means is that the road itself is still privately owned. It hasn't been transferred to the municipality, so it's not a public road, right? It's still a private road. And chances are, if it hasn't been transferred to the municipality, it is still not legal for your client to use, meaning that it's not a public road, it's still a private road. And if I did a title search on this, I suspect what I'll find is that the Black Lake Road is still belong to some person, and it hasn't been transferred to the municipality. So legally speaking, your client cannot use this road to access the cottage. Okay, so it has not been transferred to the municipality. Probably something happened. Okay, maybe a slip happened, and for some reason it was never transferred to the municipality. So it is still privately owned, and that means that your client cannot use this road to access the cottage. All right, unfortunately. So the way to solve this is that you would have to find the original owner, the owner on title, and you have to get the owner to do a deed to transfer this cottage to the municipality. Then the municipality would have to then dedicate it as a public highway. So like I pointed out before, all right, you have to make sure that there's legal access to the property. And right now, based on what I'm seeing, there is no legal access. Okay, the road is private, and I suspect there's probably no easement or right-of-way registered to allow your client to be able to use this road to access the cottage. Okay. Now it's a fictitious scenario. It's a fictitious situation. So it's probably, most of the time you'll find that if it's a road, most of the time you'll find that it has been transferred to the municipality and it's now a public road. Okay. But in this case, this road is still private. All right. Now, I also want to point out here, you see right here, there is a road that's going through your client's cottage, your client's property. It's called Black Fly Lane. All right. Now, I suspect what happened, like I told you guys before, this private road that's going through your client's property, it's, I'm sorry.
Here. Click the first one. Now it's good.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay, that's better. So we have this road here that for some reason has not been transferred to municipality, so remains a private road, and your client legally cannot use this road to access the cottage. At the same time, we have some sort of a laneway that's going through your client's property, okay, and that is being used by, I guess, the cottages down this way, okay, to be able to access their property. Obviously, you do not want your client to, obviously your client does not want a private laneway going through the property, right? I mean, who does, right? So this is something else that I picked up, that there is a laneway that's being used by neighboring cottages in order to access their cottage. They're using this laneway, which is on your client's property, to access their cottages. There is no register right of way. You can see it says no register right of way, meaning that it's not legal for anybody to be able to trespass onto this cottage in order to access their cottage. So remember I told you that it's very important you check to make sure that it's some sort of a legal basis if it's end up being a private road. Well, in this particular case, there is no legal basis. There's no register right of way. So this black fly lane, I guess when your client comes in, your client can then close this off because it is not legal for these owners to be using this laneway to access their cottage. But there is some law that says that if these cottages have been using this laneway for a sufficient amount of time, then they are legally entitled to use this laneway by what's called prescription or adverse possession. Okay, it's a little bit legal. It's a little bit complicated to explain to you. Okay, it's some sort of a legal concept. So I don't really want to tell you about this, but just be aware that from this survey, you can see that there is a laneway that's going through, I guess, the middle of your client's property, right? And obviously that's an issue that, it's going to concern your client. I mean, who wants people to be driving through your property, right? Nobody does, especially if they don't have a legal basis for doing that, all right? So once again, this illustrates the importance of checking legal access, because I'm sure these people in these cottages to this side will probably be concerned that the laneway that they're using to access their cottage is not legal. Okay, they have no legal right to use this particular laneway to be able to access their cottage, right? So this also shows you how important it is to get a survey. Okay, this also shows you how important it is to get a survey. I cannot stress this enough. When your client is buying a cottage, okay, always get a survey. Always get a survey. All right, you need to get a survey to be able to identify these issues. Without a survey, you don't know. Oh, excuse me. You don't know. You cannot determine these issues. A lot of times, these issues will not be apparent on a title search. Okay. They're only apparent if you get a survey. For example, this black fly laneway, because it's not registered, there'll be nothing on title to indicate that this laneway exists. You can only see this laneway by getting a survey. So you must, it's really important. You really should get a survey if your client is buying a cottage, okay? How to tell the difference between a plan and a survey? Helen is actually asking about this. This is a survey because it's showing a lot of the features on the property, such as where the house is located, the laneway, the access, okay? A plan I usually find with most plans, it just shows a lot itself. It doesn't show all the features of the property, such as the buildings, such as the laneway. Okay, it only shows you the lot itself, and a lot of times it'll just show the vacant lot. So a survey, this is a survey, because how to move up to the previous page.
Yeah, previous thing, yeah, right. See that, right?
Oh, okay. You see here, this actually says plan of survey. All right. All right. If you see this, this is actually a survey. Okay. You can have, oops. Sorry, here. How do I go to the next one? Oh, okay. This is a survey. A lot of times you find a survey that only shows the empty lot as well. Okay. But the most important thing is that when you get some sort of a survey, okay, not to sit there and say whether this is a plan or this is a survey. It's whether it shows you the features on the property, like this one here. Okay. So don't get too caught up with the terminology. Just look at the survey itself and see, it's a survey showing all the features of the property that that my client is buying. Another thing, a couple of other things I want to point out about the survey is that this is the septic bed. Okay, as you can see, it's encroaching onto the road itself. It's not all entirely located within your client's property. Okay, some of it is sticking out on the road. So that's also a concern too, because legally speaking, your client's bed should not be sticking onto this part of the road. Okay, so that's something, you know, your client would need to be concerned about as well, because legally speaking, whoever owns this road could ask your client to remove this portion of the septic bed. Okay, and that's of course going to cost your client money. And at the same time, you can see here that there is a overhead hydro transmission line. Okay, right here. Okay, and that's also might cause some concern for your client as well, because nobody really wants to have these transmission lines on their property. And you can see here, and we talked about the laneway as well. Okay, that's passing through your client's property, and that your client obviously does not want to have either. So you can see here, there's a couple of structures here, a shed, and I guess this shed as well. It's encroaching onto the neighbor's property. You can see here as well. Anytime you see this type of encroachment, it's no good, because it's your structure should not be encroaching onto your neighbor's property. Your neighbor could come and ask for you to remove this shed, okay, because it's sitting on his his property. Okay, and this as well. Okay. Now we're going to talk about shoreline road allowances, and I think this is what Leo is getting into. A lot of the times, if your property is sitting next to a body of water, such as a lake or a river, you'll find that there are what's called shoreline road allowances between the water itself and the property. Okay, this shoreline road allowance, without getting too technical or without giving some sort of a history about it, okay, because it actually goes, the history of these things actually go back to the 1850s. So I don't really want to talk about it, because I mean, it's not something that that you need to know, but just be aware that these shoreline road allowances exist. And in this survey, you can see it right here. This is the shoreline road allowance. Okay, it's 66 feet in width, and it's usually owned by the municipality. Okay, and it's not owned by your client. Your client's property will go from here to here. Okay, this is owned by the local municipality, most likely. Okay, sometimes the owners themselves would have gone to the municipality and would have actually asked to buy this strip of land, so they have exclusive exclusive, well, let's see, what's the word? Yeah, exclusive use, or they have, or they can use, like they have exclusive exclusive access to the water itself. Okay, so this is owned by the local municipality. Sometimes the owner will have gone to the municipality to buy this piece of land from them so that they have exclusive access to the water. Nobody, because right now, if it's owned by the local municipality, it's probably public use, and people can come and onto your property. They can actually, legally speaking, be on this part of the property, the public. Okay. And yeah, that's right. I'm gonna get to that. So you can actually just to answer Leo's question, access to the beach. Okay, you can actually buy the strip of land from the municipality, but it's a tedious process and expensive too, because you have to get a survey done. You have to make an offer to purchase, and a lot of times most owners will not bother to buy this because they figure it's so exclusive anyway. Who's going to be coming across to a river and just coming across and like getting access to the property, to the shoreline rural allowance? A lot of times they figure it's not worth the hassle. But you have to point this out to your client that this part of the property is not part of the property that he or she is buying. It belongs to the local municipality, and for your client to have exclusive access to the beach, they must must purchase this parcel of land from the municipality. And in fact, you really cannot advertise in the MLS listing that your client has exclusive access to the beach, because this is not his property. This belongs to the municipality until it is bought out from the municipality. Okay, so just be aware that a lot of times if you're buying cottages, oh, excuse me. A little bit hot. I'm just a little bit, I was gonna do a bit of a sneeze, but just be aware that if your client's buying a waterfront property, okay, a lot of times you encounter these 66 feet strip of land that belongs to the municipality, and that is not the property that your client is buying. Okay, it belongs to the municipality. Like I said, some owners may have already bought it from the municipality, but a lot of the owners haven't. Okay, and another thing I want to point out, it's very important here. You see here, this is your cottage right here. This is the cottage that your client is buying. This is the deck. And you can see that the cottage itself is not on the property. It's actually on the shoreline road allowance. And unless your client, or unless the owner has bought this piece of land from the municipality, your cottage is sitting on public land. So legally speaking, somebody could come in if they, they may come to a boat. They can just maybe, if they can access your property by boat, they come here. They can actually go into your cottage. Okay, and there's nothing you can do about it because your cottage is sitting on public land. It is not sitting on private land. And this is another reason I told you that it's really important that you check out the building permit for the cottage, because I suspect in this particular case, no building permit was actually issued for the construction of this cottage. Because if a building permit was issued, they would have realized that, hey, they're building a cottage on the wrong land. They should be building a cottage here. But instead, they built the cottage on public land. Okay, and that can cause a lot of problems because now anybody can access your cottage. Okay, and it won't even be a trespass because your cottage is sitting on public land. Okay, and also on top of that, this boathouse itself, it's also sitting on public land as well. Okay, so if this happens, your client would then really have to make the owner would have to make an application to the local municipality to buy this strip of land, okay, to correct this problem. Okay, you can see that the boathouse here, It's also sitting on public land, okay? All right, so now you can see how important it is that you get a survey, okay? Because it's telling you all these problems that you have with your property. Septic bed is encroaching onto the road. Your frame sheds are encroaching onto neighbors. Your house is not even built on the lot, on the property that your client's buying. It's built on public land, right? There's a shoreline rural allowance that your client needs to be concerned about if it hasn't been bought by the owner from the local municipality. There's the laneway that's traveling through your client's property, okay? Okay, there's the hydro transmission line. So you can just realize, hey, there's so many issues, that's coming up, okay? That, that I really have to let my client know. Okay, Leo have asked, if the land belongs to someone else's backyard, but the seller has the deed to access the beach by crossing the backyard, is this deed transferable? Okay, I'm not sure if I understand the question. If the land belongs to somebody else's backyard, if the land belongs to somebody else's backyard, then it's not your land, it's somebody else's land, okay? But I think, like I said, I think to answer the question, if your client, or if the owner has bought this piece of land from the local municipality, yeah, they can transfer both this part of the land, this land here, and this part, the shoreline rural allowance strip. They can transfer both to your client, and it'll be fine then, okay? Did I answer your question, Leo? Like,
so can you hear me?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I look at one cottage, and the sellers is not directly to the water, to the beach. And the seller say he have something called deed, say they can cross to the neighbor backyard, so can go to access to the beach. So I wonder if my buyers buy this cottage, either this deed can transfer to my buyer. So
Well, what you're talking about is really an easement or a right of way. So that's something you can show on title. The neighbor is giving a right of way to the owner of, I guess, the owner of the cottage that your client's buying. They're giving a right of way for the owner of I guess your client's cottage to be able to use that portion of that part of the land to access the beach. So you have to check on title to see whether in fact there is such a right of way or easement registered on title. Okay.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Now, there's something else I want to point out. That's what are we doing for time anyway right now?
Maybe another 10, 15 minutes or something.
Oh, sheesh. This.
But you can get another 15 minutes.
Okay. The other thing I want to point out is with respect to boathouses right here. Okay, docks and boathouses, if they're sitting on the lake or the river itself, you need to not only check that there's a building permit for the dock or the boathouse, but you also need a license from the Ministry of the Natural Resources, because they'll want to make sure that the boathouse or the dock that that comes with the cottage, that it's not interfering with any fish spawning, so that it's not blocking any movement by the fishes in a river or a lake. All right, they want to make sure that there's no obstruction so that the fish can still move freely. So you need to check with the local Ministry of Natural Resources. You need to check with them to make sure that there is actually a permit issued by the Ministry of the Natural Resources and make sure that the boathouse or the dock can be there, okay, can exist. And at the same time, you may have to pay rent, because a lot of times the Ministry of Natural Resources will will require that your client enter into some sort of a lease for that boathouse to be sitting on the lake or the river. All right. So you, if you see a boathouse or a dock, you may have to talk to the owner and see whether the owner actually has something from the Ministry of Natural Resources to allow them to have that boathouse or that dock, right? So that's another additional due diligence that you need to do, okay? If you have a boathouse or a dock, all right? Now, the other issue I want to talk about, which is kind of important, okay? So we're done with this, with the survey. Does anybody have any questions about the survey, or we just go back to the points on our slide? Okay, I guess there's no questions, so we'll go back. Okay, this is very important because it actually not only applies to cottages, but it applies to some of the properties that your client may be purchasing in York Region as well, and that's the Conservation Authority jurisdiction. Okay, anytime you have a stream or some sort of water running through your property, or if you're sitting next to a body of water, say a river or a lake, chances are your property will be subject to Conservation Authority jurisdiction, okay? Because the Conservation Authority jurisdiction is to make sure that there's going to be no flooding of the land. So they actually have a lot of requirements and restrictions on where you can build and the type of structure you can build on the property itself, because they want to make sure that you don't interfere with the slope of the land in order to prevent flooding. So if you see some sort of a stream or some sort of a small creek running through your client's property, and that's very frequent up in the northern York region, such as Keswick, Georgina. A lot of times, the property itself, it's kind of rural itself, all right, because it's kind of sitting not really in an urban area, but it's sitting in some sort of a rural setting in York region. So if you see some sort of a stream or a creek running through the property, or if your property is a waterfront property, your sensors should be clicking. Like you should be thinking, oh, it's possible that my property, the property that my client is buying, may be subject to Conservation Authority jurisdiction. And a lot of times it will be. I can tell you just from my experience, if you see some sort of a stream or creek running through the property itself, it will be subject to Conservation Authority jurisdiction, because that stream or that creek is really there as a measure of flood control, all right? So anytime there's flood control, Conservation Authority is involved. Then you need to inquire with the Conservation Authority to make sure that the buildings that are located on a property are legal. In other words, that they don't interfere with the drainage of the water through your client's property, all right? Now, a lot of times these inquiries can be very expensive as well. I know for properties up in York region, northern York region, such as Keswick or Georgina, if you need to make an inquiry with the Conservation Authority, it's Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority, they will charge pretty well about roughly $500 for such an inquiry. Yet you still need to make the inquiry, because you need to make sure that you're not violating any of the regulations regarding flood control, regarding soil erosion, okay? Because the Conservation Authority has the power to, to make sure that, that the structure itself, it's built in compliance with its regulations. So that's another layer of municipal oversight over the property itself, all right? That not only are you subject to the local municipal bylaws with respect to the structure itself, but now you're subject to another layer of oversight, and that's the Conservation Authority. Okay. Now, so just be aware, I know that some agents are actually looking at properties in Northern York region. Okay, I know this because I guess maybe the properties up there are a little bit cheaper than the properties down here in Richmond Hill, Markham. But if you're buying a property up there in Keswick or in Georgina, even in Northern Stouffville, in Northern Newmarket, okay, just be aware that if you know that there might be it might be subject to Conservation Authority jurisdiction, and that's something else that you need to be concerned about. Okay, how many of you actually have purchased or have acted for a buyer who purchased a property subject to Conservation Authority jurisdiction? I'm just curious. Okay, nobody. Has anybody actually purchased property that's up in Northern York region?
Yes, Peter, I'm Jennifer. Yes, I just bought the one land for my client. There is the things, the issue you mentioned under the land. They have the creek crosses the land. So what am I supposed to do right now? So should I?
Well, a lot of times, like you should speak to your lawyer and make sure that the lawyer actually, you can go online to verify whether your property is subject to Conservation Authority jurisdiction. Where's the property located?
In the Georgina.
Yeah, then you should go to the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority website, and then they have what do you call it? They have a website that allows you to enter the address of the property, and it will tell you whether your property is subject to Conservation Authority jurisdiction. But I suspect, based on what you're telling me, your property is probably subject to Conservation Authority.
It's vacant land.
Oh, it doesn't matter if it's vacant land. I mean, well,
yeah, there's a creek under the land. So I'm just wondering, is it buildable or not? So what am I supposed to do is the next step?
Well, what you need to do is you need to contact the Conservation Authority. And you need to make an inquiry, but the inquiry is very expensive. Like I said, it's $520 to make an inquiry. Then you need to find out from them, or you can maybe contact them directly without making a formal inquiry. You can speak to them, contact them, and let them tell you what's allowed to be built on the land itself. Because is your client interested in building on the land afterwards? Is that why they bought the vacant land?
Yeah, they want to build the retirement home.
Yeah, so they need to check with the local, the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority. You need to check with them to find out if they have any restrictions on the construction. Okay.
Okay.
And then, so it's another layer of bureaucracy that your client has to deal with. Not only do they have to deal with the town of Georgina, on the construction, but they have to go to a Conservation Authority and deal with them too, to make sure that, the construction is legal. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Now, I don't think we're going to have enough time to talk about these other issues, but there's other things that you need to consider as well. You need to consider about electricity, telephone, garbage collection, snow plowing, cable television, postal service, because you'll find that, with cottages, they may not have full access to these type of services like electricity, telephone, internet, garbage collection, snow plowing, cable television, postal service. You need to ask the owner, how are these services provided? Like, do you get regular postal service, or is postal service only once a week? Do you have internet access, or do you have cable television? So this is kind of minor issues that you need to look into, but you still need to look into just so that you can advise your client, like whether there's internet service, and what about snow plowing? Is the local municipality going to come and plow the snow when it's heavy snow, for example? because a lot of times you'll find that the road may not be plowed for days, and then that means that your client cannot access the cottage because like the snow is too heavy on the roads, and your client cannot use the road to access the cottage, or your client may be stuck in the cottage because it snowed quite a bit and there's no plowing of the snow, so your client cannot use the road to get out. So this is something that you also need to look into, but these are kind of minor issues that that you need to look into and advise your client. Okay, so that's about it. I think I'm kind of running out of time. There's some other issues, but I think these ones here are the most important ones. Okay, and a lot of times you'll find out with cottages, maybe you should use a local lawyer instead of use the lawyers down here in Markham or in Richmond Hill, because a lot of times the local lawyers would know about these issues. For example, they would know who to deal with for the Conservation Authority. They would know who to deal with for the Shoreline Road Allowance. They would know, they would have contacts already with the local municipality. They would also have a fair idea about the zoning designation because they're active on properties like properties nearby. So a lot of times you may find it's a little bit more advantageous for you and your client to retain a lawyer in that jurisdiction. So for example, if your client is buying a property in Huntsville, for example, you may want to retain a lawyer in Huntsville because chances are that lawyer would be familiar with these issues and will know who to contact instead of hiring a lawyer out in Markham who may have to start from scratch, okay, and may have to look into these issues without having some sort of experience with them, right? So that's something else you might want to consider as well. Okay, so that's about it. Do we have any other questions, or I guess we can just kind of wrap up? Okay, I don't think there's any other questions, so I think we're done. Okay, so once again, my name is, okay, oops. So once again, that's my contact. If you guys have any questions, or if you guys have any concerns about the deals that you guys are acting on, or if you have any questions about this seminar or any other real estate related questions, just feel free to contact me. Okay, that's my contact info. Okay, then, thank you.